patch fixes the bug. The patch creates another bug. The patch to fix the patch breaks a critical feature. The feature was never secure to begin with. Deploy, repeat, burn it all down. Write the code, ship the code, break the code. Somewhere in production, a memory overload. Roll back too late, now it's in the wild. 0 days laughing while the logs pile high. Update your drivers, update your OS. Whoops, now the network is...
Welcome everyone. Most people long time no see. Welcome back to our channel. Now with our Linux distribution in It Simply Does Everything mode, we can finally come back and make some YouTube videos. On my other channel live stream, someone just asked, what about Apple Silicon Asahi Linux? And actually I had this on my to-do for quite some days. So I guess it's finally time to speak about this. Just I was busy developing a Linux distribution. Because the other week, Sven Peter from Asahi Linux team posted here on the Frediverse. Looks like M4 support for Asahi Linux is going to be rather painful. We're still focusing on upstreaming M1, M2, like the 4-year-old stuff. But other people have been trying to bring up M1, M1 Mini on M4. Their bootloader, Mini is their minimal bootloader. And it looks like a few things changed. When configuring the Mach-O, it's a Mach-O of Apple, macOS, next step or so, binary instead of ELF. Now getting dropped into an environment where Apple's SPTM is running in GL2 and we are supposed to talk to it from EL2 with MMU already enabled, the memory management unit, to set up page tables. This neither works for Linux nor for running GNU under our hypervisor to reverse engineer the new hardware. When configuring a raw boot object, we are dropped into EL2 with GL2 and most all Apple-specific extensions disabled. This is totally fine for Linux, but we can't run GNU, the macOS kernel, the macOS not Unix. So under their hypervisor, the Mini has a hypervisor that they use to reverse engineer the drivers macOS. This all seems to be broken for macOS 15.2 right now because probably isn't very well tested. And that basically sums up, because people ask me, yeah, but what about Apple Silicon? I can't recommend. I couldn't recommend it the first day. So basically what that means is that will slow, like if you thought Apple Asahi Linux Silicon reverse engineering is slowish to upstream anyway, then M3, M4, especially M4 will be even slow, right? They don't even have most M3 bits. Additionally to that Hector Martin Macan42 recently resigned over disagreements with Linux kernel maintainers with Rust. I made a video, I believe. To me, it looks like a general burnout, like myself. I find this Rust argument. I do Rust. I don't like Rust the most. Rust overhyped, but whatever. That is another thing. Especially with Hector Macan, so I don't have internal insights because I do not participate into this project much, if at all. So I don't know how it. To me, from the outside, it looks like Hector Martin Macan42 has done most, or a lot, and other people, like maybe he also was GPU Lena, whatever. There is speculations. I don't know. Looks plausible, whatever. Does also not matter the most, but that also means like GPU Lena has resigned too. Recently, the other week. So that means 1 or 2 people gone anyway. There are, of course, others like Sven Peter. It basically comes back what I said when this came out 4 years ago. I made a video, don't buy, can't recommend, don't buy proprietary hardware, right? This people surprised me. I initially estimated in my 4-year-old YouTube video, I said it will take a decade to make this work great. And they proven me as slightly wrong in that they got a lot of things working in a year or mostly 2 years. Maybe for 3D acceleration and other details, it took 3 years. It's still 3 years. It's still better than the 10 years I predicted. But it also only was so fast because Apple made some mistakes, making reverse engineering so easy. And the best of the industry are, aka Hector Martin, Macan42, working on this. Oh, and GPU, Lina, and Sven Peter. I believe Sven Peter was also ready. I remember this name. I think he was part of the original P3 things as well. But correct me if I'm wrong. So they have only proven me wrong. Basically, my 10-year-old estimate was quite correct, except the best of the industry, 3, 4, 5 people, shortened 10 years, 10. So my estimate of 10 man years, 10 human years to, divided by 3 amazing people, the best 10, divided by 3 or 4 10x engineers, sure. Then most things, or many, not most, many things, they still have not probably video acceleration. I mean, first of all, even 3D is not upstream, right? Also, they resigned over that allegedly of too slow, but maybe they could also have done better job upstreaming more, whatever. Who is there at the most? I also would say Macan, not the most right with their. I'm also burned out, but hey, when I had a burnout 10 years ago, I simply, you know what, I just earn money and fuck desktop Linux. Maybe he should just have taken a holiday instead of fighting Linus Torvalds. Or walk around the block in the sunshine, or take a holiday at the beach, or whatever. But whatever the case might be, personal resources and things and life, and people, even without burnout, people can simply get disinterested, right? There's also my speculation, like maybe after 4 years of Apple Silicon, it's like they're getting bored, whatever, and then people not after his liking, and then, you know what, just, stop it, right? And they did this mostly for free, except also they are the best, most funded Patreons, probably. So not really for free, but it's not their main job. And they have at any time have the right to say, okay, I don't need this Patreon. That's like I do something else. Anyway, most things is gone, plus technical difficulties. So what this means is the ARM, like x86, has multiple rings of EL exception level things here in privilege separation hardware states. Ironically, now similar to, remember the 4 rings of x86, never really much used, like EL0, 1 application, rich OS, hypervisor, firmware, and stuff. So what that means is previously the firmware came out in a loaded their bootloader in a more privileged state so that they could virtualize macOS in their hypervisor. And so they say that's currently not the case anymore, maybe intentionally by Apple, because Linux developers, like Apple likes to do. And maybe intentionally, maybe not, maybe it's just like different shades of 4, but most likely, I'm pretty sure the Apple people thought like, damn, why did we, like major facepalm, why did we make it to Linux developers so easy to reverse engineer all our precious drivers, right? Certainly huge security fail. Maybe rushing this stuff, also like not thinking about this, like just rushing this stuff together like it usually is and bringing it to market. Anyway, but the result is that they can no longer that easily with their mini hypervisor reverse and trace drivers. Certainly there are other means, as some point out there, maybe just hook into macOS and or run it in more full virtualization and this, that, and the other. But everything more work, everything more slower, more work, more bugs, more stuff, and people need to do it, right? In general, so that's the state. And even in more supported M1 and 2, which I have one, but only because we Mac software, right? I couldn't recommend it the first day. So that's my one here. I just recently, the other day, benchmarked this freshly. And, you know, I would say it doesn't have much benefits over stuff like a Lenovo ThinkPad, right? I have here an X1 Carbon stuff. This has, but also I don't understand the hype for Apple Silicon. ThinkPads like this are better in every way. Probably cheaper, more serviceable, more upgradable. Normal storage, you don't need like DOS, Dude, solder, or Lewis Rossmann BGA solder storage. At least on most models. You have touch, like that even works in FreakyT2 Linux. And trackpoint at times and stuff. Plus standard hardware. More standard conform hardware, and similar performance, right? Like even this last year's model has a similar performance. So that is that building. It's comparing apples and oranges because the code generation, we benchmark your code generation. And so this old machine, 430, 48. So hear me out, bin utils vastly, but so Lua bash faster on last year's entry model or somewhat entry model. This somehow slower, but that's just one data point. Also, you can get the better AMD. I just don't have the better AMD model because this was provided to me on loan here by Lenovo for T2 Linux testing. But independently, I'm not paid to say that this is basically, in my opinion, standard conformant hardware. And this Apple Silicon, I said this on the day one, I say this again, I repeat this every week. I cannot recommend this anyone. Although my company makes money with Mac software, I cannot recommend Macs to anyone anymore for all those reasons. The other thing, even for me, I find this booting highly annoying, right? Even if everything would be amazing, which it isn't, this booting here is annoying. I had set up on this M1 Max that's relatively somewhat maxed out because I wanted to buy one for 8 years and I have it 4 years now. So it has some memory, better CPU for T2 compilation and stuff. So when I set this up, when it was new, it was annoying. I got it to boot, like I did it when it was early, right? Like 6 months in, 8 months in or whatever, 3 years ago, whatnot. But Apple broke it also. So it's not the first time that Apple is changing stuff here. So Apple broke my T2 installation with a macOS update. They changed 2 years ago or so. They changed that because initially I believe Asahi Linux was booted like macOS, like a Mach-O object. And then Apple thought, nah, that sucks that the Asahi Linux people pretend to be macOS and nah, we don't like it. So they later, I believe a year or two later, with a macOS update, firmware update, they added support for raw ELF or whatnot, or raw boot objects or whatnot. The Asahi people liked it, but so the problem is Apple broke my and everyone's Asahi installation 2 years ago or whenever that was. The Asahi people said, nah, it's fine, because they liked this raw object model. The Asahi people basically, yeah, we never quite liked booting like macOS, that's super annoying and stuff. Like, yeah, actually, we like it. Okay, fair. I mean, every user had to unbrick their installation and stuff. Okay. But now Apple does it similarly again of like, nah, nice Apple Silicon Asahi Linux stuff you have there. Too bad it runs better performing than macOS because Linux. It would be too bad if it wouldn't boot anymore, right? Like, so again, very sore Apple taste on my tongue here for these changes. So basically Apple does it again, right? What they did before, they do it again. And Apple is simply not a user-friendly company, right? This is why I, for a decade, don't recommend Macintoshes, Apple Silicon, or other, even the Intel. I never purchased a T2 security chip-based Intel Mac. And I have no wish to purchase another Apple Silicon ARM. As you see here, ThinkPad stuff and other such silicon is similar performing. So basically, in my opinion, Apple has very, very few benefits. And I really, really hate this booting, right? Like even for me, this T2 does not even support this better. Because this boot stuff, and that's what I hate, right? On standard conforming, on every other computer, be it a old Apple Power Mac, a UltraSpark and stuff, you plug in some media and it boots. You purchase this computer, it is your computer, and you plug something in and it boots. But not so at Apple Silicon, right? So you cannot just plug in something and it will boot. No. And the install process for any Linux is going here this Asahi stuff of highly convoluted boot objects, partitions, and Apple Silicon can only boot from built-in storage. So even if that's bricked or whatnot, you cannot boot it. You need to, like an iPhone, recover it. You need a Apple signed boot object stuff there on the internal storage to boot anything. And the Asahi Linux people, it's so convoluted. Like you need to assign permissions and privileges and whatnot. This is so convoluted. Like I did the early things 3 years ago, I don't even remember. Like, and I don't like a boot stuff where I cannot simply boot something, and it's so complex that you either need to type whatnot 20 instructions, or you just run their curl Asahi AGX whatnot install pipe to bash or sh or whatnot. And sure, the Asahi Linux installer is quite nice, but it's super complex, right? Sure, it does resize your storage and stuff. It's quite nicely done, but you run super huge scripts. I mean, okay, they only made it super huge because it has so many features of resizing and this and that and this, that, and the other. Initially, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, this Asahi installer was much simpler, certainly 3 years of feature bloat, but even the much simpler scripts were still like 20 scripts and whatnot, right? And then even to boot it, like even if it's registered, you hold the power button, you need to long press it as a boot chooser. Then if you choose their boot T2 Asahi Linux, the last Linux distribution that simply does everything you shall ever need, then it even reboots again to fully reboot. And additionally, I do not even like so the irony is 3 years ago, this Asahi boot stuff was way, way simpler. I believe, as far as I remember, I had the mini loader from 2.5 years ago directly load the Linux kernel. It probably can still do that. But if you install the Fedora Linux that the Asahi people offer you here with their web installer, you will get a quite convoluted boot chain here. Where do they even have that? I mean, this is just documentation boot shit, right? Where do we have here stages, installation stages? So whatever, I don't even remember what FooOS stands for. This, here 1TR, 1TR is one true recovery OS or whatnot. And that is basically Mac OS stub and stuff. I believe that is as whatever. I don't even, what was FooOS even? I don't remember each detail because I only do it every 2.5 years. And like, this is all the stuff, configure, boot and stuff. Like, no normal person can type this. You cannot just plug it in and type one. You cannot like boot this external device, please, because it's my Linux. It's like, you need kmuter, configure boot stuff and things and DTBs and stuff and whatnot. And the irony is, the installation, I've just done this to recover my 2-year-long break, thanks Apple, Asahi T2 Linux installation. So I just redid this recently to be able to use my Apple Silicon with T2 Linux again. And sure, their installer is relatively super nice, but I don't even like the outcome, which probably you can, obviously you can change everything. But because probably they switched from another Linux distribution to Fedora, because somehow they partnered with Fedora, and probably the Fedora people told them like, no, we're only booting with EFI. They now emulate an EFI environment. So I hate this even more. Basically, like 2.5 years later, the officially updated Asahi Linux boot procedure, they first load Mini, their M1N1 Mini hypervisor bootloader thing, and that loads U-boot. As a user, you see this. There is a U-boot logo on your screen, and it's detecting USB devices and stuff. And then this U-boot is loading grub2 because 2 bootloaders are not enough. You need 3. And then the grub2 is then only loading the Linux kernel. You probably can change this. Basically, 2.5 years later, Apple bricked it for me, and the Asahi Linux people's boot stuff now takes 4 times as long or 5 times as long because it loads U-boot, grub2, and then my Linux kernel. Plus, of course, not everything is upstream. I applaud the effort. It's an enormous effort. I, of course, applaud it. Absolutely amazing achievement, especially the magic that is done, was done by Hector Marcan, 42 Martin there. With the hypervisor and stuff, certainly huge talent, similar to all the other previous reversing of PS2 and PS4 and VU and whatnot. But it also requires such amazing talent, right? And that is currently partially gone, plus Apple made it, apparently, according to the developers, harder. In general, I would recommend I always say vote with your money, right? Vote with your money. That is the only thing the companies understand. And that is why in over 10 years, I only purchased, although I have a company with Mac products, I only purchased 3 MacBooks, I believe, or 3 Macs. The Retina MacBook Pro 10 years ago or so, and the M1 Max here for myself, and 1 MacBook Air for my wife, because she desperately wanted a MacBook somehow. But this is also the last. The next will, of course, be a Lenovo ThinkPad with T2 Linux, because have you seen? Now I need to support her macOS more than T2 would just work. Plus, she wonders why the MacBook doesn't have touch, and my precious Lenovo has touch that just works in T2 Linux. Anyway, so I vote with your wallet, because otherwise the companies, it's not only Apple. You know, everyone usually copies Apple, especially the worst thing. So if people purchase this stuff, the companies will only do it more. And that is why it's important to not buy into that, because otherwise Apple will become only worse and other companies will become only worse. And ironically, it's probably easier to run Linux on Microsoft Surface, latest Qualcomm, SQ, whatnot devices, especially with the standard EFI bootloader and stuff, right? So, comment there, bought a Mac. Bought a Mac Air, just, well, it's slightly clipped there, not, Pro software, Pro is not, but literally developer. Isn't Linus Torvalds using an M1 Air? Maybe he also moved on already. He probably builds on something, I don't know what. But even if, like, helps little. First of all, Linus Torvalds is not a reverse engineer, never was, and he will never waste a year of his life reverse engineering stuff. Linus Torvalds is busy reviewing and pulling patches. I think he recently got some. Did he not recently got in Threadripper? Did he not needed something faster? All right, he recently got a I think he got an Ampera Ultra 128 Altera. I think maybe he now has an Altera workstation. Did he? Yeah. So much to, I mean, obviously Linus Torvalds has no time to mess around with boot shit. I mean, yeah. Nicaragua, that is amazing. How's it doing? Happy to hear I'm your idol. I hope you enjoy this and learn something. Wanted your advice. Should I learn C or Rust? It's difficult. Maybe both. I need to think about this. I wish I could just say Rust. I would say write no new software in C. Of course, there still is too much C. I mean, learning C helps you with low-level understanding, so that's not that wrong. I mean, if you can both the modern Rust stuff and C for compatibility and understanding hardware better or stuff, I hope that helps. It's difficult. There are obviously too many languages. Which background ain't working? What? Yeah, touch grass, exactly. So regarding what to learn, because so many ask, keep repeating myself, I recently published here a Medium article because I thought we start publishing major IT news. And I gave you basically a summary. So close to the metal, like it basically look what you're interested in and open source things. I hope that helps you. What do you mean with background ain't working? Not really sure what you mean with background ain't working. Oh, there is a super chat from Xantefin, or that's amazing. 10 freaking euro. What Mr. Wallet appreciates this. Man, thank you so much. So it is amazing. We need more of this. And 2 live streams is, yeah, I wanted to live stream this the date happened, but I was busy maintaining my Linux. I had a New Year resolution of 1 proper video a week and on this YouTube channels, and I should work hard on making this work. But given that somehow Linux news sites are a little bit at least I started here this news site as a test on Medium. So that's of course also free and stuff. Like maybe we make a proper IT news site, like something better than Phoronix, because they don't want to publish news from us, and half of them is random. Maybe some change, maybe next year, maybe like it's like, yeah, need better news. After better Linux distribution, need better news. Comments their system is an init system, not a bootloader. Unfortunately, it can also be somewhat a bootloader, right? Like, this is why I don't like systemd, because it does everything and wants to do everything, and it does too much. I like the Unix stuff. That is why T2 has systemd, but only as an option and not by default, because I personally don't like the concept, because it brings its bootloader and then some other things. Comment there, someone never understood why Linux people are into proprietary Apple. They were not. So this is only a new thing the last years. Historically, this stuff wasn't proprietary. That was PowerPC, and that was highly standard conforming, right? And I got into PowerPC basically because the IBM stuff was too expensive and the Apple stuff was cheaper. It was more sexy, better looking, cheaper, more accessible, more people had it. And PowerPC, all my university I spent on or most of my university I spent on an iBook, 800 megahertz, and with Rock Linux, now T2 Linux. And it was fully working with everything. When on x86, you had, like 20 years ago, on my iBook, I had about 4 hours of battery life. x86 was 2. So, of course, this Apple PowerPC was better. 2 times the battery life, everything was working. On x86 20 years ago, not even ACPI suspend and resume was stable. Like sometimes it worked, sometimes once it worked, sometimes twice it worked. On most machines, it never worked. And on all the Apple hardware, PowerPC suspend resume, like on most machines, mostly worked, right? Or on most machines, it fully worked. I had uptimes of months on my iBook with 4+ hours of battery life and stuff, right? It is only, and then people continued with this Intel, which Intel still was standard conforming or EFI standard setting. That wasn't that bad until T2 security. This is also why I already did not purchase the T2 security chip and enabled Intel Macs. But the only thing is, people, probably the only reason some open source Linux people are into Apple Silicon is because ARM. They finally want ARM, high performance ARM. And if Framework would have a high performance ARM system, I think most people would rather choose that. But basically also, like, if you desperately want ARM these days, basically, probably it's better to get a Microsoft, what is the name even? Surface Pro something? Maybe I should try to get one. Just for T2 support. And isn't chips power efficiency unrivaled? No. I mean, maybe when it came out 4 years ago, but since then, Apple only made very little not TikTok. Apple only made M2 tick, M3 tick. Like, Apple Silicon is the new Intel. It was probably good. A little bit. It was also overhyped. It was a little bit better than the competition. Also, it took 2 years to mostly support. In 4 years, it's still not everything upstream. Not even 3D's upstream. Not even to mention video encode, decode is still not reverse engineered, plus other things. So, helps you little if you burn all your power for software video decode, right? Also, like 4 years of tick, like AMD made every year, AMD made a huge TOC, and Apple only made every year a small tick. So, no, it's probably similar, not far off. MacBook with I'm just happy with MacBook 2017 with CCLP. I mean, yeah, use your stuff until it's like, why not? Probably is it already T2 enabled? Then I'm not a fan of it. But yeah, if it is what it is, use it as long as it works. I mean, I could do most of my things, all my power hungry T2 Linux building things I could do on some data center thing. I could basically work on a G4 cube, right? Local email and stuff, and all the computational stuff in the data center would be no problem. And it, of course, would be more efficient and maybe even save me money, right? I wanted to buy a T14 Gen 2, but Gen 2 is old, isn't it? A T14 Gen 2 sounds old. Are they not much? I mean, yeah, performance, but also like performance, how much? Like 10, 15%? Also, do you need it each time? I probably, for little performance difference, I would not sacrifice all my simply booting and fully standard conforming hardware thing. What else do we have here? Thoughts on EFI. Initially, I didn't like EFI, but in the meantime, at least it's standard conforming. Like now, 20 years later, basically, just give me EFI. I just want to boot. Like, give me EFI, and basically better than every embedded board needing other embedded board specific boot things and stuff. We need a standard. Like basically, the only thing lacking with ARM and RISC-V is a proper standard, and not every system booting in other course ways. Want to switch from Windows to Linux? I have an experience with Linux with Ubuntu. I don't know. Stay with this one distribution until you urgently need something else. I mean, obviously we do T2 Linux, but I'm also not a fan of distro hopping. Like basically stop wasting your time distro hopping. Like use one thing until you find something twice as good or half as expensive or stuff. Learns the basics are the same for all distributions. Just learn the stuff first. Like you're also not Windows hopping. It's like you try Windows 8 and 10, 11. It's like just stay with one OS. Preferably, of course, T2 Linux, but that might be too challenging for new users. We are working on it. We are working on making T2 desktop Linux great again. C code will always exist and Rust will always have to interface. I mean, question there, should I move from Windows to Linux? Yes, of course. Windows is literally the worst operating system ever like made, the most convolutedly clumsy code base of fixes of constantly breaking and start with some popular thing, Ubuntu Mint or was. You see, I'm not even recommending my own because it's more not yet as widespread. Like maybe in a year T2 Linux, but for a start, maybe Ubuntu or Fedora, this Mint thing or whatnot, and maybe Google what popular end user thing and or this Pop OS I heard is quite fine. Bootable containers would need to Google. Not sure what bootable containers do. You were showing a ThinkPad? ThinkPad, yes. Said the performance was comparable. Which model is it? So that is this one here. 2-in-1. So as you see here, I don't have super precise benchmarks. That is 2-in-1 Gen 9. With some Intel, if I buy, so Lenovo loaned me that for T2 development, which I highly, but I say this is not because I loaned this, I just full disclosure, I shout out ThinkPads here for years. And as you see, as a boot performance, as a compare performance is similar, except this one, but this is also comparing apples and oranges because it's simply generating completely different code and generating this completely different code. Most likely, what I probably need to include for performance index here for our T2 listings is some more end user thing. But even with ARM and x86, the performance will never be comparable. Also, like for everyone gaming, you can also nearly not game on our Apple Silicon, right? Sure, you can run stuff through QEMU or Rosetta and stuff, but most people are even disappointed. They don't quite think through. They can never install much of a Windows if they need to. So there is ARM Windows, there is ARM Windows in QEMU or Parallels or whatnot. But most people also don't underestimate. You lose all the small efficiency gains you lose as soon as you need to run something with emulation. That's what most people don't think through, right? And then they realize, oh shit, like my gaming, I can't simply just, sure, you can do some gaming or App Store gaming, but have you seen the App Store games? Like most Apple Mac games, not even good. Do they even have any AAA games? I mean, maybe have some AAA games, but yeah. Like if you want to do something sophisticated, then, and then even on Apple Silicon Linux, I think DGPUs mostly don't work for total store ordering and other PCIe Thunderbolt marginality reasons. Regarding the signed boot images, isn't that a new registration? The CB boot thing is required. No. What precisely do you mean? The Apple or which one? Which boot images of what? Of Apple only boots their firmware, so you always need, like, if you have a new flash, you first need to recover this with some one TR or one true recoveries or whatever. Oh, I'm not sure which one you. Got a Lite 20 MacBook Pro. Tried getting Linux boot from USB, couldn't connect. Yeah, so I have something like that. It should just boot. The only problem is, I mean, in general, it should work. The biggest problem with those machines with Linux is sometimes the graphic mux, like if you have dedicated NVIDIA graphic. Even on my model, and then even Apple was a total asshole again. And I have a patch for that, or there are patches. I mean, maybe nobody ships them except T2 Linux. In those MacBooks from 10 years ago that have hybrid graphic, if you boot anything else than macOS, the Apple firmware, the EFI firmware, will disable the Intel integrated graphic, which is an absolutely dick move from Apple. Thank you. I made a video 5 or so years ago when I first discovered that. Here, Apple Retina here 7 years ago. Like it was even, I was like, what? I wasted so much time again. Because I couldn't even, like, I couldn't believe it, right? Like somehow there was just like, there is an EFI protocol, like basically like that. And probably nobody's shipping that except T2. I mean, obviously I'm not reviewing all the other, so yeah, obviously. So yeah, so you can boot T2. I did so 7 years ago. I did this forever. Is it pretty? No. Is it? It's like, yeah, there is it, right? Here somewhere. You need this secret protocol here that other people found, but probably nearly nobody's shipping. And yeah, in T2 we ship this. So basically you can in T2 grub, you can run Apple set OS. Maybe we should make this the default. Because if you're not telling the firmware, hey, by the way, I'm macOS, with the secret, hey, I'm macOS protocol, then the EFI firmware will disable your Intel integrated graphic, and you only have, so you have less options, and you consume more power. And the other thing is that even with this on my machine until today, I mean, I obviously don't spend time on this. My time is way too valuable, and I have no time for this bullshit. But even with all of this, it never worked quite right that there is this Gmux, that graphical multiplexer that is multiplexing with a digital switch the display data lines between the Intel GPU and the NVIDIA GPU. And that, of course, needs a driver that has a Linux driver. Other amazing people have reverse engineered this. But because it's such a complex mess, or whatever, I don't know, to this day, it does not work. It does not really fully work on my Retina MacBook Pro. That is super, super annoying. So basically, all of my effort of making it mostly to work still fall a little bit flat in this bloody Gmux does not really do what, reverse engineered, like similar to Apple Silicon Asahi Linux, like half-assed reverse engineered code that never quite worked for me. Maybe it works on other systems, but not on my Retina MacBook Pro 15, whatnot. It's here. So it should be listed here because most of my hardware are listed here. So that's Apple late. Wait, there is a typo. We need to fix this, otherwise I forget. Late 2013. Yeah, also already, but this thing still works, and I basically could still, actually I should use this move. But this thing is also falling apart, which I really hate. I really hate this. Where I have it here somewhere. I can show you this. And this is also why, in general, I would not recommend, where did I put this? Ah, here. What? What the question is, can I, let's, yeah. So I didn't use it. So I type so much, like from my typing, and I have short fingernails, right? I mean, I play guitar and stuff, but I usually cut them except when I program so much. I mean, sometimes they are a millimeter longer, right? But like, so my typing with my non-women fingernails, like, scratch this whole bloody keys defect. And that is already, I don't even use it for 5 years. So after 4 years or so, the keys looked like freaking that. Only it's a little bit dirty, or like also like this. So LA stuff. And then I always hated, like, even, I don't know if the Apple, I always hated, like, this is so misdesigned. If you open it here, where here is this indentation, like, you always press with your human skin fat fingers here on this rubber. Here is this rubber lip. Like, currently it's really dirty. I need to rub. And so first of all, first here, all this rubber is away because, like, what is Apple? What is Tim Apple or Steve Jobs doing? Like, did they not notice that each time you press it here, you press it each time on the rubber here, but also additionally, all the rubber is, no, I didn't even touch it here much. Like, all the rubber here around, all the rubber is disintegrating. And I didn't even use it that much. I mean, I used it every day, but I mostly used it closed on my desk. 80% I use this sitting on my desk with external displays, and all the shit is falling apart. The key is the bloody rubber, so I mean, basically, I don't need to look at. I mean, I don't even know why this bloody rubber disintegrates. I mostly touched it. I mean, initially this rubber disintegrated at the indentation where you open it, but then everything else also disintegrated. I don't understand this. I mean, so Apple quality. It's like, yeah, that's Tim Apple quality. Yay! Can't recommend that. Where's now my ThinkPad? The ThinkPad has here a really nice thing to open. Look at that. And then, yeah, it has here some plastic apparently. This is not rubber, this is plastic. And I mean, have you seen the keys and matte display and beauty? I mean, sure, the keyboard could be even better, but I think most people also type less than iPad. So that's probably everything we had to say. Basically, can't recommend. If someone else, for someone else, you'll take my X220 out of, exactly, basically, yeah. Successor of most recent enables Fedora. I have no idea what that even is. Bootsy, is that Ubuntu? I've never heard about this. I do my things. I'm not doing Fedora things. Put all the AA games they have also on Steam and GOG anyway. They do, but all the AA games they have are also on. Yeah, you mean some AAA games in the App Store? Yeah, but probably only few, right? Probably not every PC, like maybe some titles, and then probably not the most supported. I don't know. But the point is also like if you basically, you probably would also need to repurchase them, right? Like if you have a Steam library of your last 20 years of gaming, and then have an Apple Silicon, then you either need to run it through emulation, emulated retrans. It's not really virtualization, right? Like it's accelerated emulation. Have you heard about Raspberry Open Firmware? Yes, I do. That's also why the reason T2 did not support Raspberry Pi more before, and you'd shout out for Raspberry Pi sending this to me. So now I can say, thanks for sending this to me. Now I can recommend it more because of the boot firmware and closed GPU firmware. I never was a fan of Raspberry Pi, didn't really need that. So yeah, I appreciate this, and I always called out Raspberry Pi for the boot. But even the Raspberry Pi boot is just a couple of files and boots. It's nothing compared to Apple Silicon of like, you need this cursed vendor boot processing, and even then it still sucks, right? And then good luck reverse engineering the shit yourself. Like, so again, a huge shout. It's not criticism at all. It's a totally amazing Apple Asahi Silicon reverse engineering team. Absolutely marvelous work, starting from the PS3 or other stuff before that. To Apple Silicon, it's just, that is also, I said this from the beginning, I don't think everyone can of course do in their free time what they want, but it's also a misuse of human labor to have the most wealthy big mega corporations give you proprietary hardware that then a team of unpaid for free, basically slave labor working people needs to make working in nights and basements and their spare time with a few patronage donations. That is very unethical. If anything, Apple should have donated $1 million to those developers. I mean, they found a GPU bug, so they paid some 100,000, I guess. But like having, that is also why I would basically this kind of thing, I would rather now put efforts into make Raspberry Pi work better with T2 Linux. I mean, I have on the to-do make Asahi-like installer work on Apple Silicon, but that has not the highest priority given that it's the smallest market share. So probably eventually we have to do something there, but again, we have 700 more important things of my 920 line to do before. So you show a small embedded computer. How does T2 differ from things like Yocto and Buildroot? Much, much simpler. T2, we have it's good that you ask. We have a completely brand new website. Look at that. Years people told me, but your website looks like shit. No, I heard you. So last week's, we made T2 website great again. Much more streamlined, much better wording, much better about page, much better FAQ, much better sorting, even more content, working on documentation. Yes, T2 will be 2025 will be the year of T2 Linux. And we have a new FAQ entry. How does T2 compare to Linux from Scratch, Buildroot, and Gentoo? Do we even have open embedded, Buildroot, and Scratch Buildroot? In short, T2 is fully automated compared to manually following the LFS book. Supports more packages than Buildroot and more CPU architectures and built-in cross-compilation compared to Gentoo. I probably open embedded. Anyway, now that you ask, we probably could have even more there. That being said, yeah, it's more portable, less code, more architectures, more everything, and desktop and server. And that's probably it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Don't delay. Support Asahi Linux or T2 Linux. today, especially T2 Linux. It just does everything on everything. And hope you enjoyed to learn something. We even have audio, desktop audio, live streaming from also that is, I'm not even live streaming from the ThinkPad, but from purchased myself Steam Deck. Highly efficient. So this is T2 freaking running on 15 watt TDP, basically voting with my wallet, companies doing Linux things, supporting Linux things, and using this daily as a thin client and development workstation, live streaming here. Can also recommend that. And you also have all the integrated gaming for non-emulated high-performance gaming, even on the go. Absolutely amazing setup, right? At work, you plug it out, you take it with you. You only have one device with one OS to rule it all, and you even can freaking game. Whether on T2 Linux with Wine or you just boot the SteamOS and do some Steam gaming. And then you just plug it back in, start your live stream or your virtualized server embedded workload stuff. And that is what near zero effort, full standard, mostly standard conforming because cursed audio devices, but otherwise NVMe storage, EFI boot, normal networking shit, normal USB port, and you can even give it to your 4-year-old for some light gaming on the go and traveling. Can totally recommend. One last device you need for years, supported with T2 Linux, live streaming here with 10% CPU. I think CPU load is worse actually. I think CPU load become for some reason, by maybe different effects now. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed learn something. What is game mode? Have you seen the Steam box that some YouTubers? Which Steam box? Is it some development? I have no idea what the Steam box is. What do you mean X? Do you have X? We have X and Wayland, if you mean X with X11. I'm not sure what you mean with game mode. I'm booting T2. I'm not using. You mean this? I've seen someone auctioned a earlier prototype Steam Deck. Not sure if game mode is from SteamOS, the way it handles Windows. Well, I boot my T2 Linux. I'm only using SteamOS for if I ever have time to game. Otherwise, I directly boot into. Is it not called desktop? Is this not called desktop mode? Or okay, game mode. Probably okay. Is that probably booting into SteamOS? I probably use the game mode if that's the game mode. I don't use their desktop mode because I need T2 Linux. I basically dual boot this, right? I got the 1 terabyte version and dual boot this. Yeah, but I'm not using desktop mode. I'm just booting T2 Linux, right? Because I obviously want the best operating system experience, and that is only T2 can deliver that for me. So that's that here also now with a nice audio editor with working audio. So I hope you enjoyed to learn something. I hope this answered all questions. Can I recommend Apple Silicon? Unfortunately not. Vote with your money. Don't buy proprietary stuff. Also, this is completely not environmentally friendly, right? Because it's basically plant obsolescence, and basically you can only run stuff as long as Apple supports this, unless people like Makan, Sven Peter, reverse engineers this, and Sven Peter, and basically plant obsolescence and making it people as hard as possible to run something else. That is really not cool. If you have more comments later, add them down below. Hope you enjoyed to learn something. Maybe try T2 Linux or support us on Patreon. Otherwise, have a good day and night, and I hope to see you next time.
Beneath the shadow of algorithms, past the walled gardens of greed, we seek the root, the kernel of truth, a system we're destined to see. Not kings in castles, but hackers in the night. We wield no swords, just lines of light. The bash echoes, the binaries hum, the revolution isn't
every open state.
We don't ask permission, we fork, we clone. From source we rise, the system's dethroned. T2-liners, whispers from a quiet hub. Proof that innovation's not born of clubs. We compile futures with every commit. No proprietary chains, we're done with it.
Hack it, patch it, share it, grow. Knowledge flows where the packets go. From the coder in Berlin to the dreamer in Seoul, we are fragments of one infinite whole.
This is our language, she assembler and rust. The syntax of dreams and an insurgency.
No patents, no borders, no secrets withheld. The new world order